Okay, guys. Now we've been looking at the idea of pulling guard and trying to change your point of view about the action of pulling guard. Traditionally, Jiu-Jitsu has always seen pulling guard as a kind of defensive tactic. You feel your opponent's better than you in the standing position. You don't have any strong skills in the standing position, and so you pull the match down to the floor and look to get victory down on the mat, starting in bottom position. That's the idea behind it. We've been trying to portray a new approach to pulling guard, to see it as an aggressive action designed to get top position rather than bottom position. The most aggressive action was to pull directly to a sweep. The second most aggressive action was to pull to advantage, where you get your opponent's hands down to the mat, their body out of balance, their limbs extended, and you could take advantage of that to go into submissions and sweeps. Now we're going to look at the traditional approach to pulling guard, which is to pull just to the guard position with no inherent sense of advantage and no immediate prospect of sweeps or submissions. You're just taking the most passive form of guard pull. You might be saying, why are you going to show us this? Like, your whole thing was to get advantage when you pull guard. Why are you going to show us the traditional approach? Well, the truth is, guys, there's always going to be a time when you just want to come out and use the most conservative measure of pulling guard. It might be for just practical reasons. Let's say, for example, Giancarlo, you'd understand this very well. Let's say you've got 6 matches ahead of you. It's a big competition, and in order to get to the finals, you're going to have to fight 6 times. Let's say that 2 weeks before the tournament, you hurt your ankle. Okay, so you're going into a tournament where you got to fight 6 times, and your left ankle's busted. Are you really going to look to fight hard from the standing position? Probably not. You're probably going to take the most conservative route and just get it down to the ground where you can go to work. Okay. Let's say you're in a tournament and your first 3 matches were absolute dog fights, and you're physically exhausted, and now you got to go out and fight a 4th match. Probably the most energy conservative method of taking it down to the floor is a conservative guard pull, where you just pull to guard position, or PTP, pull to the position. So even if you are an aggressive guard puller following the philosophy which we've been espousing in this video so far, there's always going to be that day that you just want to come out and just get the minimum amount of work done and just pull to guard. So a natural question to ask is, what are the right ways for us to do this? Let's understand that there is some danger when you go to pull guard on someone. If my opponent knows what he's doing, as this young man does, he can exploit your guard pull. Okay, so if I come out on Giancarlo, and I come out in a lazy guard pull, okay, he can just push my knees aside. And it's like, oh my God, your guard pull turned into a disaster. You didn't pull guard at all. You got passed right off the bat. So there's a sense in which, even if we employ the most conservative approach to pulling guard, you're still got to know what you're doing. You can't just pull in some lackadaisical fashion and have the guy explode past your legs, and now you're fighting your way out of bottom side control. Okay, so let's understand right from the start that when you go to pull guard, where you use the PTP method, or just pulling to the position, the basic guard position, you've got 2 big options. You can pull to a supine guard, where you go directly to your back, or you can pull to a seated guard, where you go to the seated position on your hips and butt. Okay, they're both good. They both work well, but they're very different ways of pulling. Okay. In one of them, you're looking to get in underneath your opponent. That's the supine situation. You want to go in with your legs and hips and get your hips and legs close to your opponent. The other, you want to maximize distance away from your opponent and sit down as far away from him as the rules permit. One thing is common to both: you have to have a grip on your opponent. You cannot, in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu, just sit down to guard without first fixing up a grip on the mat. So let's look first at the idea of pulling to a supine guard position. Okay, that will involve situations where I've pulled to a situation where my back is on the ground. I can have my feet between his legs. I can have my legs outside of his legs. Okay, if you're a Jiu-Jitsu player who favors outside control, for example, De La Riva guard, then you would want your feet on the outside position as you go to pull. Okay, if you're a Jiu-Jitsu player who favors inside position, working like so, then obviously that's where you'll position your feet when you go to set. Now, let's look at some strategies involved here. First things first, one thing is true. I never want to give my opponent an opportunity to just go past my legs at the first opportunity. Okay, so a traditional method of pulling guard, which works extremely well, as my opponent comes out and gets grips on me, I can go sleeve, lapel. That's one good method. Okay, you can also take an undergrip on your training partner, where you go underneath your training partner's arm, like so. Now, guys, let's understand that when we go to pull guard, there's no great need to control your opponent's head. When it's time to throw people, I always want to start by controlling the head. So I typically come up higher on the grips. But pulling guard, there's no need to control the head. So you can take very lazy, lackadaisical grips with no penalty all the way down like so. Okay. As my opponent comes in and puts hands on us, we can just get any grip we want, just like so, on either side. Okay. There's no need, as I said, to come up high on your training partner. You can go on a fairly relaxed grips. Okay. Now, when we go to sit, I need to bring his body forward and out of balance, okay? So I'm gonna plant my foot in front of my training partner. If I just go to sit, okay, if I just go down here, I offer him a chance to knee cut inside my legs, or good knee cut, like so, or put a hand on my knee, and from here dance around my legs to the other side, and circumnavigate my legs, okay? So if you look at Jiu-Jitsu 101, you'll see guard pulls that look somewhat like this, okay? They come out and they get their grips and they just put a foot right in here. It's not wrong to do this, okay? But it does give your opponent some excellent passing options. He can knee cut over the leg, or he can hand post and circumnavigate my legs, okay? In top level competition, people are often reluctant to use this Jiu-Jitsu 101 method because typically the opponents have had guard pulled on for many, many years, and they look for this traditional method of passing and they rapidly get past the legs. So they have to go to a more advanced form of pulling into a supine guard. And what that's going to entail is a small, low amplitude jump, okay? The idea behind the jump is that it will quickly put all of my weight, 100% of my body weight, onto my opponent's toes. Now, guys, I'm not talking about jumping to a closed guard. We're not talking about this, where I jump here, okay? That's illegal at white belt level, and it can be done at the other belt levels, but that's not what we're talking about, because in most competition situations, opponents will be very guarded with their hips. Right now, Giancarlo is very upright, so his hips are exposed to me. So it's easy for me to jump in to a closed guard. But if Giancarlo knows my intention is to pull guard, if he's experienced, he will not expose his hips to me. He will put his chest forward over his hips. So there's no exposure. I cannot jump to a closed guard here. Okay? So instead, what we do is we jump to the floor. Okay? So I'm going to start by putting my forehead on my training partner's forehead, and I'm going to adopt a square stance. Normally, we stand staggered, but I pull his forehead to mine, and I square him up to me, and I square myself up to him. So we're forehead to forehead, and my elbows get heavy, okay? My hips are not exposed to him, and his hips are not exposed to mine. Now, in one motion, I'm going to take one foot and just step inside. And then right from here, I'm just going to make a little low amplitude jump that just pulls my training partner in. And did you see how Giancarlo lost his balance? Did you see how he came onto his toes? That means he has no ability to put his hand on my knee for that split second and pass my legs by, like so. He had to put his hands down on the floor. And if his hands are on the floor, they're not on my knee. So he can't just go to a guard pass. The jump is a tiny jump. It's just a little low amplitude jump, but it doesn't matter. The second your body leaves the floor, even by a millimeter, then he's bearing 100% of your body weight, and he'll get pulled forward for that split second, which will enable you to get to your guard position. So once again, if this was Jiu-Jitsu 101 and we were two beginners working out together, it's fine to use Jiu-Jitsu 101 methods. We just put a foot on the hip and we pull them down into a guard position, okay? But Giancarlo is not operating at
jiu-jitsu one-on-one level. Okay, he's an outstanding world champion. And so if I just start naively coming in here, he'll go into his various counters and pass quite easily. Okay, so we've got to do something a little bit better than that. And that means getting him out of balance. Yes, Kazushi is important even in guard pulling at the highest levels. Okay, and the way we're doing it is by exploding body weight. We don't jump on him, we jump in front of him. Okay, so once again, we start off right versus right. He gets a grip, I get a grip. We come in head to head. I put a second hand on the man. I walk backwards and I square up, just like so. Okay, as I'm drawing him forward onto his toes, look how I just take my foot, just like so. And then as I level change, I just give a little jump and we pull him onto us. Did you see how he had no chance to put his hand on my knee because his hand had to go to the mat to retain balance? Okay, now this time, Giancarlo is going to show how strong he is by not going down to his knees. Okay, but that's fine. Now he has to put such a backward reaction to stop that from happening. I'm still going to get to the guard position without giving him an easy guard pass. Okay, so we start off in front of our training partner. We square up just like so. I come in, and then right from here we just pull straight in. Okay, and again he had to react so strongly against the pull forward that he couldn't just go into his guard passes off the bat. And then from here, we go into whatever form of guard you favor. Okay? So this is a very practical and effective way to get us around the problem of our opponent getting the beat on us and getting off to a strong start when we use traditional methods of guard pull. Okay? So first, the problem. The problem is that if I sit in too lackadaisical of a fashion, that doesn't off-balance my opponent, an advanced opponent like Giancarlo will blast right past my legs. And so my guard pull turns into a disaster, okay? We need a faster method that either gets our opponent out of balance or creates a strong pullback where he can't just whip past my legs the second I try to pull guard, okay? This involves first a tactical element. I cannot come towards Giancarlo with exposed hips and he jumps guard on me. Okay, I have to come out behind a jigo tie or defensive stance. I have to use distance. If he gets a hand on me, like so, I put a hand on him. Now we match up head to head. I put a second hand on, just like so. I want to square him up. So I walk backwards and pull him. As I walk backwards with my training partner, okay, all his weight's going on his toes. Now I just make a little step and then my body weight explodes in towards them, and we're in the perfect position to go. Okay? From here, we can go into any form of guard that you favor. So many different ways to act. Okay? I know it looks subtle, guys. I know perhaps you're saying, it looks like it's pretty damn easy. Well, sometimes things that look simple, there's a few things going on underneath the surface that need to be explained before it all makes sense, okay? Again, if we just go out and lackadaisically pull guard at world championship level, everyone's just going to pass you guard right off the bat, okay? We can't be that guy that just comes out and goes, oh, well, let's just put a foot on his hip and boom. Now you're like, oh my God, like I just wanted to pull guard. I just wanted to get the gun. Now I'm digging myself out of neon belly, okay? So instead, we come out with a plan, even for the apparently simple act of pulling guard. We go forward, we get our first grip, okay? I cover my hips so there's no flying guard pull by keeping my head in position. My head is in a position, if he goes for an ankle pick, my head will block him, okay? When it's time to pull, I put the second hand on. I shuffle backwards to square him up to me. I put weight on the man. When I step, look how the jump pulls him on and out of balance. And then from here, so many ways for us to play the game. Okay? Now, that's if you like supine guard pulls. Okay? An obvious question here is, what if you like seated guard pulls? Now, very different. When you go to pull a seated guard, your number one problem is that your knees are exposed to your opponent. If I come up towards my training partner and just sit, like so, here there's flying armbar difficulties, flying triangle difficulties. I'm so close now, he could easily jump into either of those. And at the same time, he can explode past my knees, and now you're trying to fight your way out of that flanking maneuver. So we've got to use distance as a weapon, okay? So what I often recommend under these circumstances is we come out and I get top sleeve grip, just like so, top sleeve, okay? So we come out, I take the part of his body that's closest to me, and I take top sleeve. Now from here, I just level change down. I put my foot in, and I just sit. When I sit, let's come to the camera, Giancarlo, I never sit directly in front of my opponent. If I sit directly in front of Giancarlo, he can pass left or right, and I don't know which, okay? So instead, Giancarlo, what I do is I sit to this position here. He can only pass to my right. If he goes to my left, he's coming onto my legs. He can only go this way. And as a result, I can always follow him. I know before the act which way he can pass. So even ahead of time, I know where he's going to go. Okay? So what I do is I work with outside position. I come towards my training partner, I go top hand. Now, we're here outside position with our feet. He can only go this way. Now we follow him. Now you can go in and play your game as you normally would. Guys, notice that we're using distance as a weapon. If I slide in too close to Giancarlo, you compromise. I want to sit as far away from him as possible. So we come out, deep jigatai, both of us in jigatai. Okay? Then from here, I just sit straight down. He has to come forward, and that gives me time to get my feet in, go to work, etc., etc. Okay? So guys, do you see that even with what are apparently the easiest moves in jiu-jitsu, just PTP, pulling to guard position, there's still some tactics involved. You can't just be naive, okay? You can't just come out and be like, well, it's so simple. Just put a hand on this guy and sit down. Okay, you do that with someone like Giancarlo, you just blast past your legs. So even here, there has to be tactics. Top hand, sit. Now he can only go one way, and we know what it is ahead of time. Okay, and as a result, we can go in and play our game. If we're going to play supine, I can't be that naive guy who just comes out, well, it's going to be like white belt class. I'll just put my foot, oh no. Okay, you can't be that guy. There's got to be tactics even here. We come out towards our man and we play. Okay, and in this way, if you are going to take the most conservative method of guard pulling, the traditional PTP, or pull to the position, pull to guard position, even there's still a demand for tactics. Even there is a skill to the event. Okay, you can't just naively come out and say, well, it's so easy, just grab the guy and sit. No, it's not that simple at World Championship level. Develop match-winning habits from the start. Even with this apparently simplest, most conservative measure of guard pulling, there is still tactics that should be followed. Done in this way, you'll avoid the single biggest fear that a guard puller has, that the minute you go to pull, your opponent will explode past your legs and your guard pull turns into an unmitigated disaster where you're digging yourself out of bottom side control, bottom knee on belly, or what have you. If you're going to pull guard on someone, make sure you pull where they come into your guard on your terms. Don't be the guy who's scrambling for survival in the first 3 seconds of the fight because you screwed up a guard pull. Okay? If you're going to do something, do it right. Even the most conservative things, like PTP. Okay? So use those tactics and you'll pull guard in this most conservative way. Now, do I recommend you use PTP? Depends on the circumstances. If you really work PTA and PTS, pulling to a sweep or pulling to advantage, then you can use guard pulling in a really aggressive fashion. But guys, let's be realistic, okay? Sometimes you come up against some opponents, you got an injured ankle, You're 45 years old, maybe you've only been in jiu-jitsu for a few months, you've never trained standing position, you're going up against a guy who's got a black belt in judo or a former high school wrestler. Well, in these circumstances, I see nothing wrong with pulling guard in the traditional sense. Just take this low-risk method, get in there and get to your guard pull and play on the floor, okay? I know a lot of people say, oh, pulling guard is like an act of cowardice. No, it's not about cowardice. It's about the situation you're in, okay? There's plenty of times it makes perfect sense. And it's a big part of the game. Deal with it. But if you, like everything in life, guys, if you're going to do something, do it right. Know what you're doing and obey these simple principles of guard pulling, even with the most conservative method, PTP, and you're not going to get that worst case scenario where the guy just explodes past your legs right off the guard pull, and now you're in trouble.
Now, let's switch our focus from pulling an opponent into guard to arguably the most common scenario in the standing situation in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Your opponent comes out and goes to pull guard on you. The whole notion of guard pulling gets a lot of flack in the sport of jiu-jitsu. A lot of people see it as a kind of a cop-out, a sign of weakness. But the truth is, if you go into a competitive, if you go into a competition in the modern sport of jiu-jitsu, you are going to find that in the majority of cases, you will not get into a takedown battle with your opponents. Rather, you will find an opponent will come out and pull guard on you, especially if you've been working hard on your takedowns. If you develop a reputation as someone who's strong in takedowns, most of your opponents are going to want to pull guard on you. You can complain all you want about the rules of jiu-jitsu or the whole notion of guard pulling and say nasty words about it or what have you. No one cares. The reality is, in the majority of cases, in competition and in sparring, your opponent's going to pull guard on you. Now, you can either cry about that or you can do something about it. My suggestion is do something constructive about it. What I want you to do is to think with a kind of different philosophy about someone pulling guard on you. This is the philosophy of winning the guard pull. When someone comes out to pull guard on you, or indeed you go out to pull guard on them, there's a sense in which you can dominate the guard pull, or you can win the guard pull, or the other guy can dominate you with his guard pull, or he can win the guard pull. What does that all mean? Okay? If I come out with Giancarlo, you will remember from what we said in the previous lessons about pulling guard on someone else, that you can really attack someone off a guard pull. Okay, this was the so-called pull to sweep or PTS philosophy. So if I come up with Giancarlo and I get a grip on him like so, and I start drawing him around the corner, this is a situation where I can really go in on the attack and immediately go into sweeps in positions like this. Okay, so I pull to X guard, and there's a sense there in which I can turn a guard pull into an attack on my opponent that results in me sweeping him, getting top position and points on the board. So I think it's fair to say that I dominated the guard pull there. I came out and I got such a powerful guard pull directly to a sweep that I was able to score and get top position. That would be an example of dominating the guard pull. Okay. Now, that would stand in contrast with something which is a tier down, which might be winning the guard pull. So, for example, if I come out with my training partner and I get him into an extended position where I sit and I get his hands into an extended vulnerable position on the floor, that would be a good example of me winning the guard pull, and we could go on to attack from there. Okay? The same thing, of course, can happen to you. What if the other guy comes out and he pulls, say, Ashigarami on me, okay? He gets grips on me, pulls me in, and I get off to a dreadful start. Now I'm caught up in an Ashigarami and I'm fighting for survival in this position. I could be knocked down, scored upon, etc., etc. So that would be an example of Giancarlo winning the guard pull on me, okay? If we're down here close to the floor and Giancarlo pulls me into a closed guard, for example, there's a sense here in which he has won the guard pull because he wanted closed guard and he got it. Okay, so you can see that we can both win or even dominate the guard pull based upon what we do. When someone goes to pull guard on you, you have to think, how am I going to dominate his guard pull? Or at least, how am I going to win the guard pull situation? Let's give some clean, simple criteria
for understanding this. If someone came out towards me, and let's say Giancarlo used the classic method of putting a foot on my hip and sitting down to guard. As he goes in situations like this, we're going to get opportunities to post on our training partner's knee and go around his legs. If I've completely passed my training partner's legs, that would be an example of me winning the guard pull. He tried to pull guard on me and I passed his guard. Okay? I think it's fair to say that that amounts to dominating his guard pull. He had an objective in mind to pull guard on me, and I completely turned it around by passing his guard right off his pull. So that would be a good example of me dominating his guard pull. Okay? A tier down from that might be a situation where Giancarlo wanted to pull me into his guard, maybe a closed guard, for example, and I counter through knee position. He goes to sit into closed guard, and I just sit down here with my knee in close. Okay, so I denied him what he wanted. He wanted closed guard, and he's not going to get it because I sat down with my knee in the middle, elbow and knee joined close together. Okay, so he had an objective, and I denied it to him. Okay, so there's a sense there in which I may not have dominated him. I didn't pass his guard or anything like that, but I did frustrate him and get myself in a position where he couldn't enact his game plan of pulling a closed guard. So that would be an example of me winning the guard pull. Our philosophy ought to be, when someone goes to pull guard on us, whenever possible, dominate the guard pull. Go directly into a guard pass or even a submission hold. We'll be looking at ways to submit people who try to pull guard on us. Okay, if you can get a guard pass or a submission hold of their guard pull, you absolutely dominated their guard pull. One, great stuff, well done. Okay, if you manage to prevent them from getting to their guard pull goals of perhaps getting a closed guard or getting your hands extended on the floor, that would be an example of you winning the guard pull. Whenever possible, we want to either dominate or win the guard pull. What we don't want is the other guy getting what he wanted. Okay, I don't want him sitting effortlessly into my legs and putting me in X guard or ashigarami and completely sweeping me down to the floor and getting top position. We don't want any of that happening. This sense in which when I see someone come out to pull guard on me, I know that's their intention, that their past history in competition suggests they always pull guard, or I've been watching them earlier in the competition, their first two matches they came out, they pulled guard. I know what his intention is. I should, right off the bat, be able to either dominate or at least win the guard pull as they go in and pull me into their guard. We can't just let them sit into a powerful sweeping motion right from the guard pull. We can't let them get to their desired guard, closed guard or half guard or what have you. We should be able to stop them in their tracks and prevent them from getting a good start on us and getting the initiative as they go to pull guard. So that's our philosophy of winning the guard pull. Don't see receiving a guard pull as just this passive thing where, let's say I know Giancarlo wants to pull guard, okay? And I say, oh, well, this guy's pulled guard on everyone, so he's probably going to do it on me. And he goes down to close guard, and you just accept it, okay? You just accepted what he wanted, okay? That's not good. He won the guard pull there. He had a plan, and you let him do it, okay? We should be able to interfere with his plans to the greatest degree possible. The best scenario is where you actively pass his guard pull. Or you submit him off his guard pull. That's the best. That's domination. But we should at least just be able to win it by frustrating his plans with his guard pull and putting ourselves in a situation where we can dictate the terms the second we get to the ground. Okay, so that's going to be our philosophy of winning the guard pull, which we'll be looking at in the next few sections. Let's look at a situation where we're coming out to standing position and we've ascertained that there's a very good chance our opponent's going to try and pull guard on us. What should we be doing to win the guard pull? Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is not techniques, it's general concepts and attributes which will enable us to dominate those precious few seconds before he gets to pull us into his guard. Let's understand right from the start the most basic legal requirement that my opponent has to satisfy in order to pull guard. My opponent cannot just sit the guard. That is not allowed. Okay, he must get some form of grip upon me. It doesn't have to be much of a grip. Any form of grip will suffice. So if he grabs a sleeve cuff, that's more than enough. And now he can legally sit the guard, okay? But he must have a grip upon me. He can't just come out. It's not like submission grab where he just come out and just plonk on the floor, okay? So the first thing which we need, the first concept we need to work with is the concept of distance, okay? If I want to delay my opponent's pulling guard so I can make a game plan so that we can win the guard pull, I will use distance as a weapon. When we come out towards our training partner, the first thing we'll do is we'll maintain distance, okay? If I see him kind of aggressively coming out towards me, I might use motion, okay? So that's our second one. Motion maintains distance in this case, okay? If I see him, if I know what his plan is, he just wants to get a hand on me and sit, okay? It's up to me to use distance first, and if he goes to close distance, I will use motion to make sure it doesn't happen, okay? I might freeze, make a fake. A fake will make him move backwards a little bit. He's afraid he might come onto the takedown. If he's clumsy and he just comes in towards me, he might set up some form of pick takedown. Okay, so he's got to be careful about distance too. So we've got distance as our first friend. Motion will maintain distance. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is posture. If I present my hips to my opponent, there is a chance he may get a grip and run and jump to a closed guard. That's illegal at white belt level, but at all other levels it is legal. To show you what I mean, that's a situation where I have a grip on my training partner, and from here we go out and throw our legs around our training partner. That was possible for me to do because his hips were exposed to me. Okay, but if I put my chest over my lead leg and I put my elbows in front, that hides my hips from my opponent. He cannot jump to guard now. My chest, head, and hands and elbows are in the way. But if I straighten up, I presented my hips to him, and now he can jump. Okay? So stance is a big part of defending certain kinds of guard pull, a flying guard pull. Okay? So now we're working with the idea of distance. If he can't get a grip on me, he can't sit the guard. If I use motion, I can maintain distance. If I use stance, I can prohibit certain kinds of guard pull, flying guard pulls, for example. Okay? Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is grip. Once we get a grip on an opponent, we can sit. Now, what I'm most concerned with is not the guard pull, but the type of guard pull. Okay? If my opponent, for example, comes out and gets, say, a good upper body grip, this is where they can start doing serious damage to you. Okay, and start pulling you into directly to sweeps, the PTS method of pulling guard. That's not what I want. I don't care if my opponent just plonks in front of me with no effective grip. He can't attack me that way. But I do care if he gets a dominating grip and slides into a dominant form of guard, like X guard or Ashigarami or something like that. That I don't want. Okay. So what we do with grip is we use grip in conjunction with position. If I am directly in front of my opponent and he gets any form of grip, he can sit the guard anytime he feels like it. Okay? So if I'm going to put a grip on a guy, one of the most common things I'll do is lock up and I'll dance outside of his arm. Okay? Now, I have a grip on him, but he has no grip on me. If he were to sit the guard now, it would be a very clumsy form of guard in which he has no control over me. Okay? And from situations like this, it's not that hard for us to start countering his guard pull, as we'll be looking at later on. Okay? What I don't want is him getting a grip on me, which enables him to control me. If he has a controlling grip, he can pull himself into a guard, which can actually potentially do damage to me, sweep me, enter into submission holds, etc., etc. That I won't tolerate. So one of the best grips we can employ gets us to the outside flank position, where we grip a hold of our training partner and I outflank my opponent to the side. So I'm never directly in front of him. If his hands are directly in front of me, any grip he gets will pull him immediately into an attacking guard position. But if I'm outside his hands, any grip, he has no grip upon me. See, I have a grip on him, he has no grip upon me. Any guard pull he uses will not be an effective method of controlling me. When he tries to get to a guard position now, you're going to be in a great position to counter. Okay? So putting all this together, first thing we require is distance. I can't just let him close distance on me and now he just goes straight in. Okay, just sit the guard. Okay, he just goes boom, straight in. Now he got what he wanted. Okay, so distance is our first weapon we work with. If I want to stop my opponent winning the guard pull, we use distance. I might have to supplement that with motion because he wants to close distance. So we'll use motion to make that more difficult for him. Okay. I will use posture. If I know he wants a flying guard pull, we'll posture down, like so. Now that limits the kind of guard pulls he can employ. I've no longer presented my hips to him and given him what he wanted. Okay. We'll use position. Our favorite position is a position where we dominate the outside angle. That will mean that any guard pull he does will be an inferior kind of guard pull. He will not have any control over me when he sits to guard. And I will be able to dominate the action in those precious first few seconds right after the guard pull. Okay? If we work with these principles in mind, your opponent will never win the guard pull. The most he'll get is neutrality, but it'll never pull you into a position where he has the initiative of the guard pull. On the contrary, you will have the initiative. Okay? So again, distance is your friend. Motion that maintains the distance is your friend. Posture can be a very useful way of shutting down the kinds of guard pull he can employ. From here, grip and position to the outside, so we're never directly in front of people, will limit the effectiveness of his guard pull and create situations where as he goes to pull, you will have many effective forms of counter on your opponent. Okay? They will enable you to dominate those precious few seconds when your opponent first pulls guard. These are your first line of defense against someone who wants to pull guard on you. It's not so much technique as these concepts of distance, motion, stance, position, and grip. If you can use those in your favor, you will find that when people pull guard on you, they may pull guard, but they're not going to do it in a way which is damaging to you. They're not going to be able to grab the initiative of the guard pull. On the contrary, you'll be able to do it to them. Now, when an opponent goes to pull guard on you, the most desirable thing for us to do is to dominate their guard pull, okay? And that will entail either passing their guard as soon as they pull or submitting our opponent. We're going to be looking at both. Let's look first at the idea of passing as our opponent goes to pull guard on us. Let's understand right from the bat that your opponent has two major courses of action. He can pull into what we call a supine guard, where he lies on his back, or he can pull into a seated guard, where he sits on his hips and butt. So if my opponent goes supine, that would involve my opponent going to his back, like so. Okay, there's many ways for him to do it. He can jump, he can post a foot on my hip. We'll be looking at all these very soon. Or he can just sit down to his hips, the seated position, like so. Some of your athletes that you face prefer the seated situation. Some of your opponents prefer the supine situation, and some of them will use both. So it's up to us to be strong against both kinds of pull. You don't control how he pulls guard, so you must be good against both. Okay, in Jiu-Jitsu 101, you're probably in any beginner class going to hear this piece of wisdom. From a right versus right sleeve lapel situation, the most common grip in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu, most people will tell you, put a foot on the hip and go to sit to guard, okay? And they will tell you that the smart thing to do is to put the foot on the hip on the same side as your sleeve grip, okay? The logic behind this is, when he controls my right sleeve and he goes to put a foot on my hip, it's difficult for me to disengage my hand and put my hand on his leg because he's controlling the sleeve, okay? As opposed to the other foot where there's no control of my sleeve and I can conceivably put my hand on his leg in various kinds of ways to pass his guard, okay? There's some logic to that. It's not a ludicrous idea, but to be honest with you, you can pull guard with either foot, okay? That's become what I just described to you has become kind of a cliche of beginner classes in Jiu-Jitsu. It's not that simple. You can be effective with either foot on the hip, pulling guard, okay? But because it's the most common received wisdom of beginner level Jiu-Jitsu, we'll deal with this first, okay? So once again, the great cliche is that from right versus right, IL2 situations where we both have the most common grip in Jiu-Jitsu, sleeve lapel, my opponent ought to put the foot on the hip on the same side as the sleeve grip. The idea is that as he sits down into guard now, he can pull me between his knees and go close guard, open guard, whatever he wants, okay? With regards to whether I go to my knees or stay standing over him, there's a bunch of good things he can do. It's a good all-round method of pulling guard. It's safe, You can use it at white belt level. You're not jumping into a closed guard situation. It's pretty effective, done well with imagination and grip setups and kazushi off balancing. You can use it all the way up to world championship level. And there's plenty of very fine jiu-jitsu players who use this at world championship level, black belt and beyond. Up to black belt level. So let's deal with that first, because it is the most common. It is the most commonly coached method of pulling guard. Okay. Let's note right from the start that when my opponent goes to put a foot on my hip from the classic sleeve to pole situation, he has two legs. One will be posted on me at the hip, and the other will be posted on the floor. Okay. So when my training partner in right versus right situation goes to put his left foot there on my hip, I know now that the other foot will be there on the floor. Okay, unless he's performing a flying guard pull, we'll deal with that another time. As my opponent goes to sit down, I am going to step, he goes to sit, outside his foot. Okay, so that's our first step. What I don't want is to be between his feet. Okay, if he steps in here and I'm between his feet, I tend to get pulled between his knees, and that's what he wants. Okay, so the first thing we do here, as soon as I see his foot come on the hip, I want to step outside his foot. Second thing, my hand is going to come off his sleeve and I'm going to go in here and pose. As I pose, I level change. Don't try to do this from a high standing position. High standing, he sits down, I get pulled onto my toes and it gets very awkward very quickly. Okay, so it's important as he goes to pull, I step outside and I level change down. Okay, so from here, he goes to a step. That's my first move. Now from here, as I post on the knee, I put body weight pressure down, and all I'm going to do is put all my weight onto my left foot and step around his legs. Now from here, I drive my head down to my own hand. If my opponent turns into me, he goes into the pin. If he goes to turn away from me, then from here, it's an easy to turn away. It's an easy thing for us to control his leg like so, and put that near side hook in, and we're in business taking our training partners back. Okay? So once again, we have an opponent who wants to pull guard on us using the most commonly seen method in the sport of jiu-jitsu. We come out, right versus right situation. I see my training partner come in like so. There's that initial movement. The second movement is for me to go around my training partner's legs. Now from here, I move in. If he goes towards me, he goes into a pin. If he goes away from us, a common thing, we just put our leg over, second foot goes in, and we're in perfect position to take us back. One more time. Our opponent comes out. He makes his grip, and I notice, this guy's pulled guard on almost everyone that he's competed against so far, and we can more or less expect that to happen now. As I see his foot coming up to the hip, there's our first motion, and there's the pass off the pull. Okay, this is a very simple and very practical way for you to begin your passing off the pull. Okay, now a natural question for you guys to be asking is, okay, that's cool. What if this guy puts his foot on the other hip? What if he uses the other foot, so to speak? Now, we saw that Jiu-Jitsu 101, we always get coached to put the foot on the same side as the sleeve grip. Okay, the idea was that when he uses this foot, it's hard for me to get my hand to the leg. Okay, but I can always take my sleeve grip and put it on his knee. That's why people tell you to sit in this fashion. Okay, but in fact, it's not as cut and dried as many people will tell you. Your opponent can put the other foot on the hip and still be pretty damn effective. Okay, we'll be looking later. He can hit you with arm locks, all kinds of things from there. Okay, so when I see my opponent put the other foot on the hip, I use exactly the same hand on the same knee. Only now this foot will be posted on my hip and his left foot will be posted on the floor. We're going to step the other way now. As my opponent goes into a sit, I step towards the foot, I push his knee down, and I back step. And as a result, we end up in a nice knee cut position, right here. Now we get a hold of our training partner's sleeve, I drive my knee down to the floor, and we turn out, and we've got exactly the same result. If he turns into us, we get the pin. If he turns away from us, we're in perfect position to go through and take our training partners back. Okay? Do you see what is happening here, guys? In both cases, you are going to use your sleeve grip to post on your training partner's knee. Only he's offering you a different knee in each case. Okay. On one side, you're going to use a simple knee cut pass. And on the other, you're going to use a simple flanking pass. We outflank the legs and go on by. Okay. So don't get confused by this, because your passing hand is the same in both cases, and you always post on a knee. It's actually the same knee that you post on. It'll just be a slightly different pass. So, right versus right situation. From here, my opponent comes out and he does what many people believe is the wrong thing. That's actually an oversimplification. It's not wrong. You're about to put the foot on the hip, but he chooses it anyway. Look how I post on the knee. That never changes. If you did the correct way of doing it, you would still be posting on the knee. Okay. When he does the orthodox method, we always step towards the support foot and lower our level. Same thing. He comes in, I step towards the support foot, now it's the other foot, and I lower my level. That doesn't change, okay? Now, he goes to sit, and we're in perfect position. Just like before, if he turns into you, pin. If he turns away from you, ride the leg, hook in, back take, okay? The methodology is identical in both cases. Only on one side you'll be using a knee cut, and the other you'll be outflanking the legs. The idea is always the same. From right versus right situation, the most common grip scenario in the sport of jiu-jitsu, sleeve lapel. From here, it's my sleeve hand which will post. It's always my sleeve hand on my training partner's knee. But because of the way he sits, it'll be a different pass depending on what he does, depending on which foot he posts on my hip. Okay? Orthodoxy has it that this is the correct one. Okay? We've seen it's not as simple as that, but that's what many people will tell you. Whenever he goes to post a foot, we always step towards the opposite foot and level change. So that when he goes to sit, my hand goes on that knee and we go right past our opponent's legs. If, on the other hand, he uses the opposite foot, just like before, my sleeve hand comes down, I post on the knee, I level change and step towards the opposite foot. And this time, we knee cut, okay? And this is a very simple and very effective way for you to begin your guard pull domination, okay? This results in you countering your opponent's guard pull with a pass. You didn't just accept his guard pull, you passed him right off the bat. If you can do this, congratulations, well done. That's a fine way for you to counter. It's the best way for you to counter a guard pull. You didn't just meekly accept his guard pull and just say, well, he pulled guard on me, there's nothing I could have done. Rubbish. Very often, especially if your opponent uses a very orthodox, basic method of pulling guard like this, you can get a tremendous start right from the beginning of the match and get right across your opponent's side, okay? Putting this in a match situation, we'll go with the most common one. We place the orthodox foot on my hip. We come out towards our opponent. As we play in standing position, he gets his lapel grip. We put a second hand on, and then right from here, we see this opportunity to go around our training partner's legs and into the score. Okay, this time he comes out, he does the opposite. He does what most people believe is the wrong thing to do. Okay, again, we come out towards our opponent. He gets his grip. From here, we lock up, we put our second hand on, and from here, we turn through, drive, and end up with a nice pass. You've just gotten off to a great start. The match is only a few seconds old, and he went to pull guard, you ended up across his side. It doesn't get any better than that. So that would be a fine example of passing off the pull, the POP strategy. One good instance against the most commonly taught form of guard pull in the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Okay guys, we just looked at the idea of the most basic guard pull in all of jiu-jitsu, the one which is coached in most academies around the world. And it's a good method of pulling guard. As I said, it works extremely well at beginner level all the way up to world championship level. You still see it in the black belt world championship. So it's one we have to know how to address. But what you're often going to find as you go higher up the ranks of jiu-jitsu is people get faster and faster with their guard pull, okay? We demonstrated the
basic method of pulling guard as it's typically demonstrated, okay? Giancarlo came out, he established his grips, and you can see he's very tall as he puts the foot on my hip. So it's kind of obvious what's coming next, okay? So it was pretty easy for me just to put a hand on my training partner's knee and skirt past my opponent's legs, okay? The reality is that in World Championship competition, people are gonna come flying in underneath your hands and get to the guard pull pretty damn quickly, okay? Let's be realistic here, guys. It's unlikely you're always going to be able to get a clean pass on your opponent at the higher levels of the sport, okay? It's unlikely you're going to be able to dominate their guard pull with a clean pass all the way across side. If you do get that, awesome. That's congratulations. That's fantastic. But realistically, it's not going to happen very often. So we've got to take things down now to the second best option. If I can't dominate the guard pull, I should at least win the guard pull, okay? Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to say you won the guard pull? Well, let's be very precise about this. Giancarlo, if you just put your back facing the camera, kind of lying down. Okay, if Giancarlo, lying down, buddy, if Giancarlo pulls me between his knees, like so, he wins the guard pull because he satisfied two criteria. Let's go side on now. There's two criteria. The first is Giancarlo has me between his knees. It doesn't matter whether his feet are, okay? He can have his feet inside, but I'm still between his knees. He can have his legs outside, feet outside, and I'm still between his knees. So that's the first criteria. I'm between his knees, regardless of whether feet are outside or feet are inside, regardless of whether I'm on my knees or standing. In either case, I'm between his knees, okay? In either case, I'm between his knees. And the second criteria is my opponent's hip line, okay? The hip line is always revealed by the belt. The belt is your opponent's hip line, okay? If Giancarlo has my knees in front of his belt, he wins the guard pull. So there's two things. If his knees, if he pulls me between his knees and I'm in front of his belt, he wins the guard pull, okay? So a closed guard is a good example because my knees are in front of his belt and his two knees are around me. So this would be a win for him, okay? Same with butterfly guard. Same with De La Riva guard. Same with reverse De La Riva guard. In both cases, I'm between his knees. Sorry, in all cases, I'm between his knees and his belt is in front of me. So he wins the guard pull. Okay, stay down, buddy. Face this way. But what if I had my knee in front of his belt? Who wins the guard pull now? You do, okay? Because I'm no longer between his knees and my knee is in front of his guard pull. So this would be an example of me winning the guard pull, okay? This would be an example of me winning the guard pull. I'm in front of his belt, but I'm outside his knee. So this would be an example of me winning the guard pull. For your opponent to win the guard pull, I'll say it again, he has to have you between his knees and he has to have you in front of the belt. If he can do those two things, he wins the guard pull. And the story is more complicated than that, but it's a good, simple way to first understand the notion of winning the guard pull. Okay? So when my opponent's got a really good, fast guard pull, too fast for me to just pass his guard, POP, okay? What I'm going to focus on is getting either outside of his knees or getting my knee past his belt line. That's what my focus is. And I can do that pretty damn quickly, okay? The first method we're going to look at is a simple hand post, where I just physically shove his knees by as he goes to pull guard, okay? So let's look at what a black belt level guard pull is going to look like in competition, okay? White belt level guard pull, Giancarlo's shown it already, he just puts his foot on my hip and sits down, okay? Not bad, but at the higher levels, you don't see that quite as much as you see things like this. Giancarlo comes in, he gets his first grip, and he just jumps on in, and it all happens so quickly, there was no chance for me to think about passing his guard, okay? So when we know someone has a good, fast guard pull, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play loose with my hands. Rather than me locking on tight to his feet and holding with a death grip on his feet, which slows down my rate of working, we're going to just use hands without gripping. So I just put hands like so. I'm not gripping the gi, so that my hands move much faster. When I'm physically gripping the gi, I'm locking myself into the cloth. and it takes me longer to disengage my grip and get to the knee. But if my hands are loose on my training partner, they move much, much more quickly. Okay? So as we come out, and I see Giancarlo is a guy who likes to pull guard. Historically, he's been the guy that comes out and pulls guard on everyone he faces. First, I start bringing my chest level down. I don't want him just jumping right into my hips. Okay? So I bring my chest level down. Okay? Now, as Giancarlo goes in to get his grip, we're just going to take our hand. It's already ready to go. He goes in to move. We just pass the knees on by. The sooner we get the hand to the knee, the happier we are. Again, to win the guard pull, I need to either get outside of his knees or I need to get my knee past the line of his belt or the hip line. Okay? You can do either of those two things, you win the guard pull. So we come out. First, I don't want to present him my hips where he can just jump to a closed guard. He's definitely going to win the guard pull if he does that. Okay? So I come in, I hide my hips. Now, as I get down low, he comes in for his grip. I'm already thinking, my hand's in place, he makes his step, then we go straight down and you win the guard pull. Okay? Have you passed his guard? Nope. But you're definitely in a position where he can't just attack you here. He's going to have to recover guard. First of all, he can do anything. Okay? And you're in a very strong position now to start passing. There's a lot of good passes from here. Okay? You can go forward on our training partner, step through, and end up in great positions right off the pass. Okay? He's going to have to stop whatever he's doing and recover his guard before he can do anything. So you have seized the initiative of his guard pull. He was looking to get the initiative. You stole it from him, and you won the guard pull. Okay? The key idea, if we work with Giancarlo back to the camera, first things first, we don't start gripping the jacket. It's going to be too slow. Okay? We just have our hands out, relaxed on him. I keep my body down, so you can barely see me from the camera frame right now, because I'm right in front of my opponent. Now, as he goes in for his quick, we're already passing it by. Okay? Facing this way now, Giancarlo. Coming close to the camera. Okay, I never present my hips to him. Now I can just jump right in. Okay? I use hands and head. My chest comes down. So now you know there's only really one way he can do it. Oh, he's got to come in the front door. My hands are not gripping the gi. Okay, I just have hands on him, so my hands move quickly. Even as he steps, that's my target. So as he makes the move to the sit, you're already pushing it by. Now guys, let's understand this. It's difficult for Giancarlo to do this in slow motion. Giancarlo, do your best. We have to show what makes his leg unweighted, okay? Slow motion is possible. Giancarlo, slide in, watch his foot. He plants it, so there's weight on the foot. As he slides, this foot reaches for me and it becomes unweighted. And that is when you push it. Interestingly, Giancarlo, go down and keep going. Freeze there. Right now, all the weight's on this leg. It's hard for me to move it because all his weight is borne by this leg. I can't push it. Point your knee outwards. It's hard for me to push it. But as he reaches with the foot, that's when it becomes weightless. Okay? So let's look at this again. Okay, Giancarlo, distance. We come out towards our man. First, we play the distance game. Now, I've watched Giancarlo compete, and I know he likes to pull guard. The first two matches he had earlier today, I've seen him pull guard. Maybe we've been sparring in the gym, and every time we've ever gone, he's always pulled guard on me. So I know what he likes to do, okay? So from here, I start bringing my head level down, okay? Now I'm not presenting any hips for him to do a flying guard pull. From here, he puts a grip on me, so I know he can pull guard. Now, the moment he grips me, I know he can pull guard. Okay, I put a post hand on and I don't grab the gi, I just hold like so. As he goes into his sit, I place, push, and we end up winning the guard pull. Okay, guys, this is a very fast and simple way for you guys to win the guard pull against someone who comes in hard and fast on you with a black belt level guard pull, who just scoots in underneath the hands and looks to get the initiative. Okay, so one more time at competition speed. We come out towards our training partner. From here, he comes in, and we go straight down toward it. Okay? And that is a good example of winning the guard pull. You ended up outside your opponent's knees, denying him the two criteria he needs. He needs to pull you between his knees and keep his hip line or belt line in front of your knees. If you can do those two things, he wins. If you can deny those two things, at least one of them, you win. Now, we're talking about the notion of winning the guard pull. Our opponent comes into a supine guard pull. We know what he wants to do. He wants to position us between his knees with my knees in front of his belt. If he can do those two things, he wins the guard pull. So we need to stop him. We either got to get outside of his knee, or we got to get one of our knees past his belt line or hip line. Okay? That's how we win the guard pull. Now, as you go with better and better opponents, they tend to slide into guard pulls rather than sit into guard pulls. In Jiu-Jitsu 101, the classic method is the sitting guard pull, where he puts a foot on my body and he sits into a guard pull. As you go with better and better opponents, you see that being used less and less. You still see it being used. Even at World Championship level, you still see it. But typically what you find is people slide into a guard pull. And the reason they do this is because it off balances your weight forwards. Okay, so I'll demonstrate it first on Giancarlo. Okay, at World Championship level, what you'll see is guys come down here, head to head. When we're head to head in the Jigotai, if he goes for any kind of leg takedown, my head position makes it really difficult. So it's hard for him to shoot for my legs. If he goes for any kind of upper body takedown, it's difficult. There's only one takedown which is easy from him, that's Tomoe-nage. So what I do is I walk backwards. When he tries to hit Tomoe-nage and I'm walking backwards, it's impossible. Okay, he needs me going forwards onto his Tomoe-nage. Okay, so when you see guys who know what they're doing with a guard pull, there's more going on than most people realize. Guard pull, what a coward, he just pulled guard, it's so easy, okay? Actually, believe it or not, there's more going on than most people understand, okay? Again, at World Championship level, first, I've got to shut down his double leg and single leg. So when we come out, we lock up, I use head position, okay? When he shoots, the head makes it very difficult. It'll defend the ankle pick, it'll defend the single leg, it'll defend the double leg, okay? Next thing, he goes for, say, Harai Goshi throw. My head position makes it difficult. I just take my head, I bury it here. For him to throw me, he needs to stand up, and he needs to take his shoulder moving in this direction. But when my head is in the shoulder, he goes to throw, my head post blocks him out. Okay? So you play head position as your main form of defense. Okay? Now the only throw you can really hit from here is Tomoe-nage. If I'm an idiot and I push into him, look, Tomoe-nage. From here, I get thrown by Tomoe-nage because I'm moving into it. Okay? So what we do is we walk backwards. When he goes Tomoe-nage, nope, it's going to fail because you're walking away from it. Okay? So that's what I should be doing as I go to pull guard. Now, when it's time to pull, from here, I put in a leg like so, and I physically jump my hips in towards him. Just like so. We put either feet on the hips or legs on the outside, depending on what kind of guard you like to pull. Okay? Because most jiu-jitsu players in the world today, working with the gi, generally prefer outside foot position, De La Riva guards, things like that. Probably the outside foot position is the most common form. You can always switch to inside foot position after the pull. Okay? So the most common form of guard pull we see amongst world champions today is things like this. They walk backwards a little, defending themselves, and then they just pull straight in like so. Okay? In other words, they slide into the guard pull. They don't do this. Put a foot on the hip and sit down like it's Jiu-Jitsu 101 and get past. Okay? They tend to aggressively jump in. So you've got half a second to do something. Okay? It all happens pretty damn quickly. You're not going to have time to always post on the knee and fully pass someone's guard. Okay? In these circumstances, what we do is a jumping counter. Let's try and do this in slow motion. When someone comes in and they aggressively pull, what they want to do is to pull me in like so, and then from here, you'll notice that there's a height that I have to clear. It's the height of his hips. If I get pulled down to my knees, he gets closed guard. He wins the guard pull. Okay? But if I take my knee high and he pulls me in, you win, because your knee has a height advantage. If your knee can go higher than his hips and over the hips, you're going to win the guard pull. So that's what we do. As my training partner comes in, distance, We know what he wants. He wants to pull guard. We've seen him do it on numerous occasions. Okay? As he comes out and secures his grips from here. As he comes in, I'm going to lower my level and I'm going to jump like so. And as a result, I go right over my training partner's hip. It's as though you anticipate the jump. So what we do, fellas, the second you see him jump into the slide, you jump up. He jumps towards, you jump up. That will give you an immediate height advantage of your knee. And you will be able to clear his hips and get your knee in front of his belt. Sorry, get your knee over his belt. He wants the knee in front, you want the knee over and past, okay? So the timing is this, because this is a timing move. If I'm too late and he comes in, you get pulled in like so, okay? So what I have to do is as I see him come in, I jump. And we end up right over his guard pull. And as a result, you win the guard pull, okay? This is a very, very simple, relatively easy way to counter a guy who's got a good, fast, sliding guard pull, okay? Just as soon as you see him jump towards, you jump up. It's really easy. Guys, you don't have to jump high. You're not doing some kind of Olympic high jump here. Even a 53-year-old cripple like me can do it. All you have to do is clear the height of his hips, which is only that high, okay? So even a tiny jump will be more than enough. So once again, we've got someone who's at distance. I can tell by his stance and his demeanor that he's interested in pulling guard, okay? The second he gets his grips, we know the laws enable him now to pull guard. So I level change and I just bring my knee up like so. Now, what you do with the second hand is up to you. Some guys keep the hand on the sleeve. What I recommend, put it on the floor, okay? Because the sleeve grip won't help until later. So what I generally recommend is keep the hand on the lapel and the other hand just goes on the floor. You'll be nice and stable and you'll be able to beat your opponent's hip line with your knee. So once again, we come out, we're hand fighting. He comes in, he takes lapel grip, I take lapel grip. I don't bother grabbing the gi, there's no need, it's not going to help. And then right from here, as he jumps, we jump. Okay? Now, even if he brings the second knee in to block and do all those things that people do, you're in a pretty damn good position. Okay? You're, as it were, dictating the terms. Even as he goes to push me off now, he's not attacking, he's thinking about framing, defending, and putting me back in guard. He's not thinking about what his next offensive move is. He's thinking about how he's not going to get scored on. So you won the guard pull. One more time, guys. We've got a man at distance. I can tell by his demeanor, this guy's interested in pulling guard. I can tell by his historical record what his game is. Okay? As he comes out, I start lowering my level. I know he's a guard puller. From here, he comes in, gets his first grip. I just put a hand on him. I get my lapel grip. I lower my level. He jumps, and we're in perfect position to jump over his jump. Okay? He jumped, I jumped over his jump. And as a result, you won the guard pull. Now, guys, at the start of this section, you'll remember we said there were two ways our opponent can go to pull guard on us. He can pull into supine guards, where his back goes towards the floor. So any form of closed guard, for example, would be an example of this. Many forms of open guard where they throw their back on the ground. These are all examples of a supine guard pull. Okay, so if my opponent comes towards me and throws his back on the ground, that would be an example of a supine guard pull because his back is on the floor. Now, the second big option your opponent has is a seated guard pull, where he sits to his hips and butt. Okay, in these situations, typically the distances between us are greater. Okay. Typically what happens is they get any kind of grip on your body and they just sit straight down to the floor. Now you'll notice that Giancarlo is further away from me in these circumstances, okay? When someone hits a supine pull, they're looking to get their hips as close to my ankles as possible. That's in their best interests, okay? But when they hit a seated pull, they're looking to get their hips as far away from my body as possible. That's the difference between the two, okay? We'll explain more of this as we get further into the video. So a natural question for us to be asking is, okay, we've looked at how to deal with a supine guard pull. How do we deal with a seated guard pull? First option is the Osoto pass. Do you guys remember we looked at the idea of a Sotogari in the standing position? In your first days in Jiu-Jitsu, you got taught Osotogari as a step to the outside of your training partner's legs, an extension of a leg that puts you into a strong throwing position. Okay, that reach to the outside of your opponent's hip is the defining feature of a basic osotogari. Okay, where my right leg goes outside my training partner's right hip. Okay, that action defines the beginner level osotogari. Okay, we can use the same action of right foot going outside right hip for a guard pass against a seated guard pull. So as we come out with our training partner and we get into a situation where I feel, okay, I've seen this guy operate before, and what he typically likes to do is get any kind of hokey grip on me, and then from here just sit down, just like so. Maybe you've seen the guy in operation before and you know this is his favorite gambit. Okay, under these circumstances, a good thing for us to do is to get a lapel grip on our training partner. Now I go in and I get a sleeve grip. Doesn't matter whether he grabs me or I grab him. Either way, it's the same. Okay. As he comes in, I just pick my knee up and I step to the outside like an osotogari. What I can't do is let my opponent put my weight onto my front foot and sit down. And now he wins the guard pull because he pulled me between his knees. Okay. Remember, guys, his whole game is to pull you, I'm sure you can guess it by now, either between his knees and at the same time, keep my knees in front of his belt line or hip line. Okay. If he does those two things, he wins the guard pull. So I don't want to be between his knees, and I want my knee to penetrate past his belt line. So when he goes in to sit, okay, I just pick my knee up. Okay, just like so. That enables me to step so my knee is outside his knees. Now when I drive forward, my knee is past his hip line. And so you win the guard pull. Okay, now how's this going to look in competition? From a situation where he comes out and goes in and gets his grips, and we work from a position like so. When I see him go into a sit, we go straight forward and past our training partner's legs. Okay, now Giancarlo's being polite, so he's kind of angling his legs off. This time he's not going to be polite. He's going to try and trap me between his knees. So what we have to do is we have to take our knee, go to the outside. You'll see that as I pull, I bring my knee to the outside. I don't present him my knee and get pulled between his knees. I take my knee to the outside and then step past my opponent's belt line. So as we come out with our training partner, we come through, we get our initial grip, he comes in, and we go straight through into the guard pass. Okay? So this is an excellent way for you to pass your opponent's guard when they go into a seated guard pull, the Osoto pass method. It's an excellent way to counter people who tend to sit rather lackadaisically down to butterfly guard. And let's be honest, guys, a lot of guys do it because they think they've got distance. Okay? A lot of guys say to themselves, hey man, he's so far away from me, he'll never pass my guard. Well, that's true if I remain stationary. But when he goes in, it's a big step. You cover a lot of distance with 2 steps. And now you're outside his knee and you're past his belt line. Okay? This is particularly good anytime you have sleeve lapel grips. Same as Osotogari. Okay? So as we're down low and here, and I see him go aggressively into his sit, that's exactly where we want to be. Okay? And you end up with a nice pass right off the guard pull. Let's look at a very effective way of getting an initial advantage over someone who's elected to go into a seated guard pull. Okay. Now we know that when someone goes into pull guard, typically they like to get as low to the floor as possible to make a faster transition to the guard pull. Okay. And so typically what you see amongst most guard pullers is they will work from very bent over stances, jigotai, defensive stance like so. Whenever someone goes into a jigotai, one of the best ways to grip them is over the top, because they've presented their back to you, in particular the scapula. So we're going to get a grip here on the scapula. Okay. Now, as Giancarlo is in front of us, we're head to head. So if he went for any kind of shot, your head position will make it difficult. So they're more or less limited now to the guard pass. To the guard pull. When he comes in to the seated guard pull, you have this useful grip, the scapular grip. Now the scapular grip can carry quite a bit of weight because your opponent's gi locks at the armpit. So it carries quite a bit of weight. What happens is the grip slides halfway down the back and stops. And then from there, I can put a lot of body weight on my training partner. Okay? Now I post my hand either on the knee or on the floor, either between his feet or outside, or the knee. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, and 3. And then we do a hop or a jump. The amplitude of the jump doesn't have to be much. It just has to be enough to pass your opponent's knee on the side you're passing towards. Okay, and then in one motion, we just get that simple jump right past our training partner's legs. If he stays seated, you've got his back. If he puts his back on the ground, you've got a pass. Either way, you're happy. Okay, so a simple jumping counter to a seated guard pull. As we come out with our training partner, we're head to head, and I have the scapular grip. Okay, now from here, he comes into the pull, and we're in the perfect position to jump past our training partner's legs. Okay, now from here, he had to put his back on the ground to prevent back exposure, and now you just, if he turns into you, you settle into a good pin. If he goes to turn away, you guys know what to do. You're in the perfect position now to get the hooks in and go into work and score. Okay, so this is a very simple way to win the guard pull on someone who's elected to sit into a seated position off the standing start. So once again, when we come out towards each other, we take the traditional jigotai, which often signals the onset of a guard pull. He can't jump guard because I'm hiding my hips with my elbows, hands, and chest. He can't really shoot because my head position, he goes for any form of shot, will defend the shot. So from here, he goes into his guard pull. From here, I post, here, here, here. Any one of them is good, okay? Now, this grip makes for an excellent weight-bearing device. And as a result, it's very easy for us to put the hand down and we hit the jump over this knee. And we just come right around the corner. As he tries to escape from us from here, it's an easy thing to follow him down and go on the attack, okay? Understand that the only height you need is to beat this knee. It's not asking much to jump that high, okay? If you wish for a higher amplitude cartwheel, that's fine too, but it's kind of overkill. So once again, we start here in front of our training partner. I take a scapular grip. As I see my training partner go into his pull, from here, we just jump right over his legs, okay? From here, we end up in a good pin across our training partner's side. Very simple, and very effective way to win the guard pull against someone who's elected to pull the seated guard. Now, we've got an opponent who wants to come out and pull guard on us. We're looking to win the guard pull by getting outside of his knees and past his hip line as soon as possible. One outstanding way for us to do this, anytime an opponent pulls a seated guard, is a long step pass. Unlike the other ones we've looked at so far, this will require us to go down to our knees. That might be because Giancarlo pulled me down to my knees, or more likely because you dropped to your knees. Okay? So again, we have the jigotai, or bent over defensive stance, that often signals the onset of a guard pull scenario. I go over the top, I take the scapula, the easiest grip to get against any jigotai situation, okay? Interestingly, guys, if we come close to the camera, when a guy's in a full jigotai, it's actually pretty hard to get to a lapel, okay, because the angle. When we come in here, the lapels are actually kind of hidden from me, but one thing that's never hidden is the scapula. In fact, it's more exposed, okay? So, my training partner comes out in full jigotai, and we work from this position. I shoot in over the top. Now, as Giancarlo goes into seated guard, we grip right here, just like so. I come down to my knees, and right off the bat, we long step. Now my hand switches to the second leg. I'm not allowed to go inside, stay on the outside. As Giancarlo goes to put me back in guard, I stiff arm. He goes to bring his knee in, he can't. He tries to come over with the other leg, my head position makes it difficult. Now I just come up to my knee, and I walk towards his hips to get the pass, okay? This is a very, very practical way to pass right off the pull, okay? So again, we have a training partner here in front of us. As we come out, we play in the jigotai, okay? From here, I go through, I get my grip, I catch, and then right off the bat, there's the drop to the knee, and there's the turn. Second hand switches, extend, like we're doing a tricep press. He goes to put me back in guard, can't do it with the left leg. Tries to do it with the right leg, can't do it because of my head position. Now, I switch my base, put my knee in the hip, and walk. My training partner sits down to secure the parts. My recommendation to you, Giancarlo, let's come close to the camera. Distance, distance. As we come out and we play the game in close, okay? He comes in, catch. Head position. Even as he goes, catch. Don't sit all the way down, Giancarlo, okay? I go scapula, he goes lapel, catch. So you're ready to go, okay? Now, even as he goes, I go to my knee and turn. He goes to fight the second leg in. See how close he gets in? Remove it. Beat the knee, walk, 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 and beat the hip. Okay? So again, in slow motion. The one grip you can never deny in the jigatai is scapular grip. Head position. Level change, catch. Even as he's coming in, we go past with the long step. Okay? Now, let's have a look at how it would be in a competitive setting. We have an opponent. We've seen this guy before, and we know he likes to sit to a seated guard. I can tell by his jigatai that that's what he's interested in here too. Okay? I get my first grip over the top. I get my head position. He goes to shoot for my legs. Can't do it. Okay? Now I see him move in. And we go straight down into our pass. Okay? An excellent way for us to gain the initiative against someone who likes to pull a seated guard and get you winning the guard pull.